David, wonderful to catch up with you, sir. We've got tons to talk about. This conversation, we've got to talk about your conversation with Chairman Powell as well, and the VP pick too. Can we just start with Philippe Laffont? What do we need to know about this gentleman, and what can we look forward to later this evening?
Philippe Laffont is an immigrant from France who came here at the age of 16. He worked for Julian Robertson after he got his degree from MIT, and he built one of the largest hedge funds in the technology space. It's about a $50 billion hedge fund, and he's had successes through up and down times in the economy, and I think he's considered one of the best technology investors in the country, and he's built a really wonderful reputation for investing in technology companies in the United States and around the world.
David, while we have you, we have to talk about your conversation with Powell. You tried very much so to get something out of him in terms of when he might move. Some even chuckles in the audience as you did that, but he stayed very steadfast. What was your takeaway from that interaction?
Well, he's very experienced at not saying anything that will get him in trouble. Obviously, he's not going to make any comments unless they're official comments, and he wouldn't make those until after there's been an FOMC meeting. So I think he's very polite, he's very smart, he's worked with me over the years at Carlyle, but he doesn't tell me anything that he shouldn't tell someone like me. So I couldn't get him to say anything other than, you know, that he'll have an FOMC meeting and they'll look at the data and they'll do what the data suggests. So that's all I know. I don't know any more than I knew before, I guess, really, but I'm glad he did the interview and he gave some insights into what it's like to be the Fed chairman, because obviously everybody's paying attention to every word you say.
And David, you've caught up with him a few times, though, in the post-pandemic world. The inflationary challenge in front of him at the time, how difficult it was. It just feels like that's slipping into the background, and the focus is shifting a little bit more to the labour market. Can you give us your impression of how the arc of your conversations has shifted somewhat over the last few years with him?
Well, clearly, when inflation came, it was not recognized as being as enduring as it turned out to be. The Fed chairman and the Secretary of Treasury and others said it was transitory. They recognized later it was more enduring than that. But I think the Fed did a really good job of increasing interest rates without putting us into a recession. As you may recall, people were predicting that the high interest rates would produce a so-called hard landing last year and a hard landing this year, and it hasn't happened. And so now we're at the point where interest rates are likely to be lowered, and we haven't had the hard landing that people predicted. So I think the Fed deserves, along with others, some credit for managing this high inflation period of time.
David, I'd love to get your thoughts and reaction to what we found out last night, which is the VP pick for Donald Trump. It's going to be JD Vance, really emblematic of this pivot of the Republican Party to the populist wing. Who do you think represents the pro-business interests in America now?
Well, I was somewhat surprised by this election only because, you know, he's young. He's 39 years old. We've had young vice presidents before. But I thought, you know, he added less to the ticket than some of the others. But obviously Donald Trump, you know, knows what he's doing in terms of politics. He seems to be, you know, pretty successful in that area. I would say I knew JD Vance before he got involved in politics. He was working for Steve Case at a not technology, but a startup kind of venture fund to invest in companies throughout the United States, but not just in Silicon Valley or New York or Boston. And that, called Rise of the Rest, was a fund that JD Vance was working at, and I invested in the fund. But before the fund was completed, he left and did something else. So I met him in that context. That was before he was involved in politics.
David, did you invest in the fund because you also were interested in the individual?
No, it was Steve Case who had the track record of and the concept of investing in technology companies that are not just in Silicon Valley or Austin or Boston. And so it was investing throughout the Rust Belt, among other places. The idea was that there are good technology companies there as well. And so that was the idea. And because I guess JD Vance had been from the Midwest, was from the Midwest, he was thought to be a pretty good guy to invest in that kind of company. And so he did that for a while. I think he left after maybe a year or so to do something else in Silicon Valley.
David, what do you think the business environment needs to expect now, given the potential of a second term with Donald Trump, and some of the thoughts that we've heard already from Senator JD Vance on things like antitrust, on regulation of technology, on mergers and acquisitions? What do you think's in store? And is the Republican Party of old? How much has it changed over the last few years? Is it still that traditional pro-business movement?
Well, obviously, the Republican Party of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s is not the Republican Party of today. It's different. I think trying to predict what the party is going to do and what Donald Trump is going to do if he's elected president is very difficult at this point because he hasn't picked all of his advisors. But it's clear that Donald Trump controls the Republican Party, and it's pretty clear that he's got a very good, healthy position today as he goes forward. I was sad to see, obviously, that the shot at him over the weekend. We're very fortunate that he was not more severely injured because, as we all know, a half an inch either way, it would have been a very tragic accident for the country and for his family. Fortunately, that didn't happen.
Absolutely horrific. But David, you did not answer my question originally, so if I could just get back to that. Which party is now the pro-business party?
Well, both parties have certain pro-business elements, and business people will complain about both parties on certain areas. So I don't think it's fair to say either party is the pro-business party because business is so many different types of business. But clearly, the Republican Party today is different than the Republican Party of 20 or 30 years ago or when I worked in the White House more than 40 years ago. And clearly, the Democratic Party is different than the Democratic Party of 30 or 40 years ago. So the world's changed, not surprisingly. I think both parties offer some things for the business community and some things the business community doesn't like. But I think it's too early to say what President Trump would do if he were elected, and it's too early to say what President Biden would do if he were reelected. It's just too early because we're just too far away from dealing with the economic situations that we'll see in next year.
Well said. David, it's fantastic to catch up with you, sir. David Rubenstein there of the Carlyle Group. You can watch David's interview with Philippe Laffont a little bit later at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Bloomberg TV.